taking your face-to-face content and throwing it into a Blackboard shell, and then, grading things. It's a completely different attitude towards your students, towards the work itself, and communication that it's important that you understand. And I think initially it takes a lot more time. You're doing a lot more one-on-one communication with your students, usually writing it, which that alone takes a lot of time. And then the global commenting to a class as a whole. The things that normally would be maybe housekeeping in a face-to-face class become a different kind of communication, like announcements in Blackboard. If you don't have an attitude of, or a practice of checking your email or your inbox regularly, that becomes actually really important, because a student who asks you a question about an assignment, given whatever you tell them your response time is going to be, maybe it's 2 days ahead of time, they need to know pretty quickly that response, because they have no recourse if you don't reply to them. And so that's part of the design process. One is putting a course together where that lag time, I don't know, lag time's not appropriate, that taking that chance that you can't respond to them within 5 minutes, for example, that it's not instantaneous feedback. It's allowing for that when you are assigning things. So it's utter clarity, providing examples, providing rubrics of a sort if that's appropriate. And I'll talk more about rubrics later, because I have a relationship with those. And one of the first things that's important is that students know who you are. Again, like walking into a classroom, giving them a welcome video, for example, and how to navigate this course introduction. A lot of it seems natural and intuitive once you actually see it, but there can be an inclination when you're putting together a Blackboard course to just put the content in there, give a few directions, start here, and then walk away from it. And the additional time that you put into, scripting a welcome message, creating that video, creating maybe a screencast to navigate through the course with students is really important. I was just reading through articles about this in the past couple of days, and one of the comments that I really liked about why lectures can actually be important is that it gives students an example of how an expert in the field works through problems. So you can write out a lesson, you can provide the reading, you can offer assignments and quizzes and things like that. But there's something about actually working through material with students that gives them that insight into how someone in the field actually does it. So, going through a chapter, like guided reading through a chapter, for example, or some problem solving screencasts or videos. So a lot of math instructors will use a Bamboo tablet, for example, and create a screencast of working through a problem and talking about the process, and not expecting students to glean that information from a chapter, for example. So that on the tech side of things, there are so many ways that you can capture that process. It's not just, setting up a camera and talking at students. There are screencasts that you can do for writing anything out, problem solving. If you want to work one-on-one with a student, there's Google Drive has, Sarah Stanley in the English department works on Google Drive to, with students working simultaneously on their papers with them. So, and actually sort of witnessing the writing process and talking with them while they're doing it, which is something that would be useful in a flipped scenario or an online course. And there's the Google, in Drive, there's the drawing feature. Oh, I guess I can show you. Which has been useful in again, if you've got like a Bamboo tablet or something, even if you don't, this works pretty well for if you want to write out, oh, sorry, I want the scribble, which I take exception to as I place a high value on drawing, but if you want to work something out with students, I want to imagine the scenario where that's important. We're talking about the potato or something, but there are so many ways that you can asynchronously or synchronously use these tools that are free and open to all of us to communicate with students and to really foster that sense of presence, that you're there and that their presence or their questions are answerable beyond just an email explanation or something like that, or referring them back to the course material again. So this is meant to be about presence and participation. So there's the instructor side of things, just letting students know that you exist consistently. And also the student side of things, their participation in the course. So how do you foster that? Because you can create as many videos as you want and reach out and to students individually and make announcements and that kind of thing. But how do you really get them to, or attempt to get them to participate with you, with each other, with the material? And again, of course, it depends on the nature of your course and how useful some of these things would be. I have been teaching online for about as long as I've been an instructional designer, and I came from a face-to-face teaching background. But when I went into teaching online, I missed that sort of immediate in-class back and forth that was its own method of problem solving. And I lean pretty heavily on discussion boards in my class, but it has been through several semesters a process of what do I tell students about how we start replying to each other? How do we make substantive responses to, beyond good posts, good job, I like that. And a lot of the time it's just giving them some language to start with. While I found the premise of your discussion interesting, I disagree with this point, and I think actually that, and a lot of the time students just aren't equipped with that. They kind of either have a passive approach to it, like I don't agree with it, so I'm just not even going to respond, or they have sort of that anonymous internet vitriol that they reply with, like, I can't believe somebody could be so stupid and say something which I actually have encountered it like once in class. So they tend not to do that. But the passive approach is just as dangerous, I think, to ignore. So just giving students that language can be really helpful. So this is what I was talking about. It's not very visible. With rubrics, I don't think rubrics are 100% necessary. Some students like them or respond really well to them. Depends on the discipline, the assignment. But when it comes to a discussion, when maybe you've got 35 students in your class, you want to promote discussion, you can't every single week write 35 individual responses to students or twice a week. So what is sort of a framework that you can give them to help them understand how, if you're scoring discussions, how you're scoring them, how to, again, how to ask them to respond to each other, to the material, and so forth. And this it's a good breakdown that I don't follow specifically for my class, for example, but I think, so the criteria, let's say criteria is content contribution. An unacceptable discussion post would be off topic, it's incorrect, it's irrelevant to the discussion. Whereas up to an excellent post as far as content contribution would be a post that's factually correct, it's reflective and substantive contribution, and it advances the discussion. So getting students to the point where they're actually creating inquiry into the topic that you're discussing beyond just responding to what you're talking about. And I think also, as far as a discussion board goes, or a discussion board or a collaborate session, or anything where students are sort of joining the discourse of a discipline with which they may not be familiar, or they're just kind of finding their feet, or even a platform that's new to them, is giving them sort of these guidelines and allowing for progress, allowing that initially your discussion post may be, you may score, if it's like a 1 to 5 range, might be a 1. For a few weeks, you might get a 1, then a 2. And it's important to allow them that sense of that their score will allow them to progress, and that there is no sort of innate ability to discuss something that must reveal itself within the first week, or else they're just not going to get there. So that comes with frequency of posting, I think, as far as designing the course model, and feedback, of course. If a student's getting a score that that baffles them even after explanation, then there's a problem with the guidelines or the rubric or the discussion. Well,
So is this,
not that one student.
Is this rubric available on the iTeach site or with the slideshow?
Yeah, I can put this, I'll put this slideshow on the Google Plus community for faculty development.
For faculty development in general?
Yeah, I'll show it to you.
Okay.
And
not to interrupt or anything.
No, that's because this is important. So it's called UAF eLearning Faculty Development. And it's open. Okay, so it's an open community, which means that you can, if you just search it in Google Plus, you'll find it and you can join it.
I'm sorry, what's it called?
UAF eLearning Faculty Development. Does everybody know how to get to their Google Plus page?
Oh, yes. How you doing?
Okay.
If you just send me that, I'll post it on the
okay.
site too, and then folks don't have to remember it. They can just
right. Yeah. Okay.
We'll post that for you.
So I will post my slideshow on here, and so you can look at it whenever you want. And I've also put links at the end. This is available on the iTeachU site. Oh, I did have a link. I'll have to add the link to what page this is on. But this is part of a larger slideshow from somebody from another university that actually has some really useful guidelines for discussion and for just online teaching in general, but mostly for discussion, participation, presence, that kind of thing. And I think one issue that I've encountered from the faculty that I work with is wondering, how do I create a discussion in this class? I can't imagine, unless students are bringing it up themselves, I can't imagine a question I could ask that would encourage discussion. So this slideshow it's really useful in helping you sort of determine a starting point for, you're the subject matter expert, you're the one who understands the current state of your discipline in the world. So there's always going to be something that you can pose to them. And I like starting with, and it's in the slideshow, recommend starting with a what if. So a really open-ended question that gets students individually are likely to pose fairly different answers, and giving them that opportunity to not feel like you're sort of fishing for a right answer, that there is no yes or no absolute response, and that there's room for thinking and interpretation and development. And again, giving them an opportunity to create further inquiry into whatever you're talking about, however you've got your course broken down by concept, by unit, or that just specific topic. And the way, I don't know if you can see it, but the way this is broken down, it's looking not so much at getting students to talk to you, but getting students to talk to each other. So that sort of second element of the students communicate with you, with each other, and with the material. This is the part where, and this can be really difficult online, because I think sometimes you have to introduce groups, for example, in Blackboard, or what can be even more difficult is giving students each other's emails. And you're always going to have the one student who just doesn't reply or doesn't contribute to the group, which is fairly reflective of what happens in a face-to-face classroom too. I think it might be easier to get away with online, but or easier to commit online. But this is asking, what are some types of questions or projects that you can put to students that will help them work with each other? And for example, it's broken down into question types: exploratory, for example, interpretation, a problem, which is like the what if, that challenge students to find solutions to real or hypothetical situations, and giving students a way to break down a problem or break down a response so that there are clear roles and who performs what portion of this. Brian O'Donoghue in journalism he's got a course where students it's the Extreme Alaska course. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's online. It's an open site that you can go and look at. But every semester, he rotates roles through students, and he's teaching it online in the fall for the first time. So this is logistically is a challenge because it's there's an editor, someone who's in charge of images, someone who's in charge of some other element, and those roles have to rotate throughout the semester so that each student gets a chance to perform each role with a different group. But that's one way of getting students to work with each other in roles that are pretty clearly defined. They know what's expected of them. There's no sort of, pulling teeth to get somebody to participate in their group. This last slide, which you can mull over if you like, it's a list of fairly recent, within the past year or two, articles about instructor presence, how different instructors, different universities are, and I think these are all from instructional design sources, but are managing to create and maintain instructor presence and to what benefit to their students. And there's one this last one is the balancing act, recognizing that it does take a huge amount of time to respond to every student, especially individually. So how do you design a course so that you can manage your responses to students and that they're still getting the benefit of your presence? So it's a really useful article. And these are all kind of enjoyable just to browse through. There's nothing too substantial here, but they have too long, substantial, I guess. And there's also some good resources listed as well. Does anybody have any questions for me before Martin talks about some of the other elements?
Yeah, actually, the discussion at the very previous slide, is that more for asynchronous or could it be applied to asynchronous as well? Because, designing an asynchronous class, I'm having a hard time figuring out how to get the students to work together.
Well,
in
I
an
think
asynchronous setting.
Is that you're going to talk about collaborate? Is that right?
I'm going to talk about collaborate, which is primarily synchronous
Yeah.
or asynchronous if you record
If you record it,
make
right.
the recording available.
Mm-hmm.
So with this, if you have an answer for it, go for it. If not, I'll put my 2 cents in.
I would say one of the ways that you could approach it asynchronously for students would be to have them keep Google Docs, if that's useful to the project, because you can really host almost any kind of file or information in there, and you can keep editing or viewing privileges specific to groups and you.
Yeah.
So that's a way they could all, if they're all happen to be in there at the same time, that's great. If not, they can all see the edits that the others have made, and it's not a matter of they don't have to. There's not a program that they have to maintain or software, and they don't have to save a Word document or something.
Yeah.
One of the some of the tools that I use to encourage the asynchronous piece is, I'm currently teaching an ed class, and one of the things that we do is a lot of the work is done outside the classroom. Almost in a flipped classroom kind of mode. But I use some online discussion boards like Edmodo, for instance, which allows me to set up a class, if you want to think of it that way, and those discussions happen all the time. I may post some initial comments, they may respond, whatever the case may be, in a situation like that. And so we've got that venue. They surprisingly use very little of the email. It's only if there's something that they feel is desperately targeted just to me, they'll email me, but most of the time it's questions that crop up there. We also use a lot, the Google Docs is definitely a way to go. They use Google Sites, and so a lot of, if they've turned commenting on it, that's entirely their call. I'll go make comments, other members of the class will go make comments on information that's being posted or their reflections or that sort of thing. Then we use some other tools, and we just started using Mindomo, which is a way to do brain mapping, basically, so you can get out there and mind mapping stuff. But one of the interesting things about Mindomo is it allows them to create public mind maps, so that again it encourages the the rest of the class or myself to go in and make additions or
Mhm.
comments or suggestions.
Mhm.
And again, that's all out of class.
Yeah.
There isn't any fixed time where any of those things.
The nature of the collaboration for all these is written.
Right, I mean, that's
Yeah.
where the action really is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
when we're all in contact with each other, in whatever form
It's
that
all-
may be, it's more from the purely instructional side, or I've got questions, how do I do this?
Mhm.
But the majority of the action takes place asynchronous.
Yeah.
There are a couple of other things that you can use. I've taken a class in Photoshop and one in InDesign where the instructor had a blog set up and we uploaded our images to that blog. I was working on something
Mhm.
proprietary at the time and was not willing to share it with the general public, so
Mhm.
my portion had to be locked down only to the instructor and the students,
Mhm.
because I was actually using something for work as my example. And our contract with Banner says you will not show
Right.
off screenshots, period. So you can do something like that if you have images
Mhm.
or if they're producing something like an InDesign document as the final product. You can have those loaded rather than have them submitted as an assignment within Blackboard where only you can see it. So that's another way to share it.
Mhm. Thank you very much.
That's all I've got.
Okay.
Got nothing else.
Okay, any other questions? And Brooke's not going anywhere, so we'll turn things over to Martin. Martin, as you already kind of guessed, is going to take things in a little bit different direction. One of the more common tools that we have on campus, of course, is Blackboard. And Blackboard has a variety of tools within it that you can certainly use. Probably the biggest one is being used for classes that may physically be able to meet, but maybe they don't because of whatever kind of considerations, is Blackboard Collaborate. Plus, it's probably the tool to be using for folks who are working out in who knows where. So keep that in mind.
Can I get in to collaborate on this system without knocking you off the Google Hangout?
Don't have any idea. Let's find out. We'll play some fun games here, right? Let's see what happens.
While we indulge in our technical challenge, there's more pizza over there and there's more water.
Let's see.
And I'm going to grab my hand out.
All right. Let's see. Collaborate. I hope it's even on here. Let's see.
That'd be a little bit unsettling.
Oh, I'm sure it's probably not on here, is it? Right. It would figure. Okay. Let's see. Let's go to.
Brooke, you probably already got all of this.
Okay. Do we have a link to the launcher? There we are. Let's see what happens here.
The three handouts I gave you, two of them are just a quick reference guide. One is for moderator, one is for participants. I recommend that as part of your initial course documentation and part of your intro, give the students a copy of the participants guide. If you've got somebody that's got no experience with Collaborate, that'll help them out. moderator guide, if you've got a new instructor or if you are a new instructor with Collaborate, it's got some of the tips and tricks on it. These documents are available from Collaborate. If you follow the helpline from within a Collaborate session, you can download these. You can also get the full moderator publication, which if you print it out is about 3/4 of an inch thick, so I don't recommend that. But you can also read it through as an HTML document or save it as a PDF if you want to know about some of the other tools that are available. The primary one I use, because I'm doing mostly synchronous, I use the whiteboard, I upload slides, but when I've got folks like I did this morning down in Juneau, you can't really tell if they're awake. So you've got to do things to get the engagement, to get the response. A lot of what I do is just pausing, thank you, and asking questions. So I'll ask a general question like I do with everybody in the room. Is everybody here with me? Did you all see this? Did anybody get a different result? I'll pause, and if I don't get something from my folks online, and what I did this morning was, okay, folks in Juneau, I can't see your smiling faces. Did this work for you? And forced them to unmute the phone and talk to me. They get the idea usually by the second time. Okay, nothing heard from Juneau. Is there a problem? What went wrong? Oh, he means it. Yeah, everything worked. Or no, we're trying to figure out where you went in this step so I can go back and redemonstrate.
Did it trying to upload and collaborate lecture again?
No, it's trying to bring down the meeting collab.
Okay.
So on this one, do I want to save it?
Just click open with, click choose, and then let's see. Interesting. Where's the? Oh.
You're seeing a primary example of why when I'm actually teaching my other classes, I try and have Collaborate open before the session starts. That wasn't possible today, but this is one of the things to be aware of for troubleshooting. It takes time.
Okay. Hopefully, theoretically. Wonders of technology.
Mm-hmm. How many of you have used Collaborate or are using Collaborate right now? A couple yes, a couple no. Thank you.
Fairly or unfairly, going into designing my class for next semester, which I'm doing now, I'm at the beginning.
Mhm.
The only thing I knew going into the process was that I wanted to stay as far away from Blackboard as possible. So I'm open to being talked out of that, but that was my starting point. For
Okay.
the class.
What are you using? Or what are you thinking?
That's yet to be determined.
Okay. Blackboard is an extremely powerful tool. It can be a lot. It is not the only tool, and it may not be perfect for what you're teaching. That's a decision you're going to have to make. Chris can give you a lot of information on the structure. If you're working with an instructional designer from eLearning, they can also help you, give you a lot of the reasons for using it. What it ultimately comes down to is what is best for your teaching style and your students.
But you're going to show us some reasons to use it.
I certainly hope so. With this, I'm in a basic setup. I don't have any participants, but there are some things that you can do. You can engage the students with the whiteboard. So where Brooke showed the sketch tool or the scribble tool, you have the same thing here with the whiteboard. Do lines. You can put images in here. You can upload your slides so you can have your PowerPoint presentations or other slides set up in Max PowerPoint variant and just advance through the slides with the screens up here. One thing to be aware of is if you rely on animation in your slides, this is not the tool to use because it will strip the animation, but you can use application sharing so you can have your Prezi presentation up, share the application, run it through Prezi, and it goes out to your students. The limiting factor on that you have to keep in mind is it uses more bandwidth to do application sharing than to upload to the whiteboard. I teach computer applications. I teach Excel. I teach things like Toad, SQL queries tool that I was teaching this morning. I have to use application sharing. So I open up application sharing. I share Toad, and everything I do within that tool, my folks in Juno could see. So they could follow the examples, see what was going on. And I also have the advantage, if I need to, I can let them share their screen and I can see exactly what they have. I can tell them, okay, the field you're entering is the wrong one. Move your cursor one field to the left, type your password there. Now hit OK and let it log in. So I have the advantage of using that. It is another way to engage the students. It's not as flexible as having everybody editing the same Google Doc at the same time, but I can share the application and let Brooke update the Word document or update the spreadsheet, and then I can have it shared with somebody else, and I can actually have that single file on my computer. And I can just rotate in turn, letting each of the students do their example or do their presentation. So I can make anybody a presenter and let them control the whiteboard or control the web tool and go to different websites and share their presentations. That's one of the ways to engage your students is have them work the whiteboard, have them do a presentation, or have them work an example on the screen in front of everybody else. Questions, comments? Yes.
If you upload your PowerPoint, can you show, can they have access to the PowerPoint and you draw the whiteboard at the same time? Can they see both simultaneously?
You would actually be drawing on the PowerPoint presentation. So you would not have them in separate windows. So basically what you do is have your presentation going, then put a new blank whiteboard page in, do your drawing there, and then go to the next slide,
Okay.
unless you actually wanted to annotate your PowerPoint slide. And you could do that. You could have the PowerPoint slide up, and highlight your main points. So you can do that, and then either clear the whiteboard, clearing the annotations from the slide, or simply move to the next whiteboard screen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Brooke, Chris, Gary, feel free to chime in with your suggestions also. Those of you that are using the tool, if you have another way, I need to learn too. got a web tour function right here. You can open that up and you can go to a website. Your decision on using this depends on what you want the students to do, because here you take them, you show them the website, and they have control over their end of it. So if you take them out to a website that has engineering information on it and they would rather be over looking at their Netflix, all they do is click the link in the browser window that spawns, and they're over on their Netflix screen while you're lecturing about the engineering. You don't know they've changed. The other thing you can do is actually share the application so you're in your browser window and they see whatever browser page you happen to be on, so they're on your website. And you still can't control, oh, they opened their own separate window or opened the other browser, but at least you know that when they come back to yours, they're going to see the content you're pushing. And again, it comes back to the ask them questions, get them to respond, what are they looking for? And you can either do that verbally, just ask them, or you can do it through things like a poll. You can set up a poll and just go into tools, polling, set the type. If you give them just a yes, no, when they put their cursor over respond to poll, they see yes or no, and they get to give that response. So here, since I'm the only one in here, there's not a whole lot of information. But you can either set it up so only you see their responses, or you can set it up so the results go out to the whiteboard. So you can ask a question like, is everybody with me? Or does everybody want to look at the cat videos instead of the engineering data? Do the poll, publish it out on the whiteboard if you want, or just keep it to yourself. And you'll see their responses here in the attendee list. So you'll see what they said. Same thing if you give it a multiple choice. If I answered D, then I would have D showing up in here. But the rest of the students cannot see, only the moderators can, unless you publish it to the whiteboard. You can also lock response. You can tell them you have 30 seconds to answer the question. At 31 seconds, you click lock response, they can't answer. So that'll tell you who was paying attention. And unless you ask an exceptionally complex question that requires a lot of thought, you've got answers from everybody. Questions here, comments?
There's a timer function as well, if you wanted to use that.
Under timer, further down on the, yeah, right there.
Thank you. Yeah, you can set the timer as a countdown or a count up. A lot of times I'll use this one if I'm doing a break. You say, okay, you have this much, click, there's the break. Or if you want them to do an exercise, then you can set the timer up so that they know when that runs out, they should have finished and be ready to respond.
I use it to help me keep on track. Yeah, I mean, if I got, if I think my lecture should be about 12 minutes. 20 minutes it is, and, I mean, I can make it so that timer only shows to me as the presenter. But it does keep me on track as well.
So a couple of different ways you can use that. Do any of you use small group discussion in your face-to-face classes? You got one yes? Yes. You can do the same thing within a synchronous Blackboard Collaborate. It's called a breakout room. And with that, you can set up breakout rooms and let students move back and forth if you want. You can set up a fixed number of breakout rooms and distribute your students en masse, or you can send them individually. And if you set up 3 breakout rooms and just hit divide evenly, Collaborate's going to go down the participant list
Keep going.
and just grab your participants and exactly what it says, randomly stick them in the rooms as evenly as it can divide them. If you want them in specific rooms, you can actually highlight the individual name, send to breakout room, and pick which of the 3 breakout rooms you want to send them into. Each breakout room gets its own audio conference and its own whiteboard. They can actually save that whiteboard and publish it back to your central whiteboard so you don't lose what they're working on it. So you have a chance to use small group discussions within Collaborate. As the moderator, you can move yourself from room to room. So just like you would if you said, scatter out into the 4 corners of the room and walk around, you can bounce in and out of the rooms to make sure that they're actually staying on track. Or if they have questions, you can go ahead and answer them. So that's another way to stay engaged.
But if you're recording the class, then those small discussions aren't recorded unless you go into the class or go into the room that they're in, and it
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, if
That's
you're
what I thought,
doing
yeah.
your main recording, it only records your main.
Right.
So you would capture what was on the whiteboard, but you would
But
not
that was it,
capture the
yeah.
verb.
Yeah. Okay.
If you don't want to use any of those tools, you can still engage your students and you can still get feedback from them with the chat line. I've taken a lot of classes where the instructor will ask a question and say, put your response in chat. And a lot of those are not gradable questions, but they're just a check for understanding. So they'll say, what do you think the color should be for the background that we're designing? Put your response in chat. And then you can go through and look at your list for who's responded in chat compared against your participant list and say, well, Sean, you didn't respond. Don't you have a color that you think should be in there? So type it in chat for us, please. And you can work with it that way. You also have options in here. Let's see. You can use emoticons. Emoticons is what other people. So you can sit here and say, okay, is it going fast enough? Give me a smiley face if we're on track, if we're on pace. Do you need me to go faster? Do you need me to go slower? Give me a thumbs down if the example didn't work for you. So you can have them do just this quick, are you paying attention? Tell me. So the same things you can do by looking at the student as you've got the class and looking to see, okay, is he looking back at me? Is he engaged? You can do with the poll, with the emoticons. The emoticons are quicker because you can just say, give me a smiley face, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Are you ready for the next lesson? If you do this consistently, your students are going to get the idea, oh, hey, I'm going to keep getting asked if I'm paying attention or not. Maybe I better pay attention. No guarantee, but it's one way of at least driving home the point. Question, comment?
Is there a way, since this is within Blackboard, is there a way, you just said that if you're doing a chat or doing a poll, you can compare that to your participant list. Is there a way to have that compared to your participant list for you, since your participant list is embedded in Blackboard, so that you can just see which students didn't respond instead of having to look back and forth between the list you have sitting on your desk?
Actually, with things like the poll, all you've got to do is scroll down your participant list, because all of them will be listed right here, and you can see where I've got the green check. That's where the response is. So it won't automatically pop up and say Martin didn't respond, but you can scroll down the list, and every place you don't see a check mark or a letter, this person didn't click the box.
So it doesn't just add a new response. You've got your participant list there, and then when they do emoticons or checklists or answer D, you can see that right there in the participant list.
Sure. If I do the emoticon, it's going to show up down here, and then when I hit enter, it shows up on the list.
Mhm.
There's no direct comparison from this to the participant list. If you do a poll, it shows up next to their name, and you can scroll down and see it. So there is no automated response to take the emoticon to the participant list.
But the polling does.
The polling does.
Great.
And the green check mark or the red X in the participant window. So if that's a yes or no question, you can say, give me a green check mark for yes or an X for no.
Mhm.
So, and that those icons are gonna stay until
Okay.
or until the next question. The other thing is that you can pull these modules out now by dragging the title bar. Martin can show that, so that if your chat box is a little too small, because you have, I don't know, 20 or 30 students in your class, you can resize that and make it bigger. If you have more than one screen, you can pull that up to your other monitor. I participate in collaborate sessions that are sometimes 150 to 200 participants, and it's just the chat box just keeps scrolling. I can't keep up.
Yeah.
So I pull that onto my other screen, make it much bigger so I can follow.
Are any of you teaching a blended class and planning to use Collaborate? One thing that I like to do is I log a second computer in for myself. I call it Monitor. I make it a moderator, and I show all of the chat on that. And on my main screen, the one the studio audience can see, I hide the chat pane. Because if you are a moderator and you have the default setting on Blackboard Collaborate, you see private chats. So if Chris and Gary are in my class and Gary says, why did Martin say that? That was stupid, in a private chat to Chris, and I'm showing it as moderator to the studio audience, everybody sees that. And then I got to do something about it. If I have it in as private, then I can go back later and say, okay, Gary, what did I do wrong? What did you think was stupid about what I said? And the worst time I ever had before I started this was I was teaching a blended class. I was at the back of the computer lab helping somebody on his computer, wondering what everybody was laughing about. I turned and looked at my screen, and two young ladies from Juneau had been discussing their previous weekend's activities. Oh, yes. And the remainder of the class was just fascinated.
And with that, you can save the chat log as a moderator, and it will include those.
Yes, it will. I did not save that chat log, by the way. And I
So
turned.
private isn't really private.
Private is private from the other students. It is visible to moderators. And it's actually a setting that you have where you can see the private chats and you can monitor what's going on through the classroom. The rest of the students, unless you're showing it on the screen, they cannot see a private chat. So if we were all in the session, Gary sent Chris that message, you sitting looking at your computer would never know it happened.
But the moderator will.
Yes. And the reason I keep those on is if it had been something like, he's not explaining this clearly, I'm not getting it, what am I missing? Then I can go back and I don't have to wait for Gary to say to me, I didn't understand that, because he might be embarrassed to say that. I don't have to wait for a pause. Okay, are there any questions? I can just say, I went through that example a little quick. Let me show it to you a second time. So going back to start, and I can try to catch that, bring that back in. Gary doesn't feel singled out. I don't have to wait until a break for him to come up and say, hey, you didn't explain that clearly, but I can still make sure that he's up along with us and ready for the next example. And the couple of other people who probably didn't get it either, but didn't say anything. Questions, comments?
I guess if there's no questions or comments, then I would say thanks for coming, folks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brooke, for being here from eLearning. Next month, Owen Guthrie will be here with Chris Becks. And I've got a topic, it is engaging assignments. So how to make an engaging assignment using online tools. So we'll, of course, send a reminder out at the end of the month and a second reminder early in March. So plenty of pizza left, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Shall I stop the broadcast, Gary?
Yeah, just kill it.